morning, Warsaw. Today is Saturday, 12th of August. It will be sunny all day with highs of 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit for our American listeners. Sunrise will be at 5:29 a.m. and sunset at 8:24 p.m. We are on the 12th day of the Warsaw Uprising, and the insurgents are trying to make up for their lack of weapons and ammo. Apart from that, what else is happening?
So it's day 12 of the Warsaw Uprising, and it's pretty grim. The old town, there's still constant bombing over the old town. There's intense fighting on the ground. The insurgents are defending their positions against constant attacks from the Nazi Germans. They do have some innovative weapons of their own. In the last pod, we talked a bit about the innovation of the German military. Alina, can you tell us about some of the weapons that the Poles are using in their defence?
Yes, so Roger kind of alluded to this in our previous episode, and of course Philip gave the game away a little bit in the introduction, but the one I'm going to be talking about is the creation of the błyskawica. No, not the radio station. We're going to be talking about the błyskawica gun, and what's really interesting is that this is the Polish copy of the British Sten gun, and it is one of the most amazing things that was achieved by the Polish underground, especially within the arms factories, because błyskawica is the only submachine gun in the world that's actually produced and assembled under occupation conditions as part of conspiratorial activities, and it was created in mechanical workshops in Warsaw, and approximately about 700 of these weapons were produced, and it was developed by two Polish engineers. One of them was a former employee of the pre-war ammunition plants in Warsaw, and he's the one who developed the details for the structure and the methods, for example using small production workshops, because we've got to remember, if this is being done in complete secret, the whole thing was not produced in one place. So there were several places in Warsaw that produced all of these bits and pieces, and it consisted of nearly 58 parts. So that includes a barrel with an aluminium cover, a gun grip, a trigger mechanism, a stock, a magazine well with a hatch, a bolt with a bolt handle, a recoil spring, a magazine spring with a magazine. It's absolutely incredible, and it took about 45 hours to produce one gun, and that's not including the barrel. The production began at the end of 1943, and by the time the uprising began, they had about 100 of them were ready to go. So in the last days of July, the strict securities are completely abandoned, and the secrecy surrounding the production of the gun, and the focus was basically production. We've got to remember, insurgents have a lack of weapons. This will help them, basically. During the uprising, the production plant and the assembly plant is moved to a completely new premises, of course, and it was in the headquarters of the Protection Unity of the Military Publishing House, and this is why the soldiers of this specific unit are armed, exceptionally large number of them are armed with the błyskawica gun. And over throughout the whole uprising, about 40 of these are produced, and it's a great thing because you get to see them actually on film. At the Palladium they were shown. They're also immortalised in various different photographs that were taken by the propaganda department, and I highly recommend people to go and have a look at the błyskawica gun. It's an amazing creation by the Home Army.
It's incredible, isn't it? If you think that they are a city under attack, under constant bombardment, they don't have excellent supply lines, but they are managing to support themselves from within the city. But they are also now transporting parts, all these various parts for a machine gun, which they are then assembling centrally and then delivering out these weapons again across the city in constant process, just-in-time delivery, as it were. Really extraordinary, the level of support for the resistance that they are, for the fighters on the front line, that's ongoing as well. Perfect intro. They didn't have much. They need stuff to be dropped in.
Claire, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, what's happening in the air then?
Well as the enemy bombing attacks, which are obviously still ongoing, it's like constant air raid, really. The Home Army is in desperate need of supplies from their allies. They pretty much know these are not going to be coming from the east now, so they're hoping for airdrops, air deliveries from the west. And what they've been hoping for air deliveries right from the start. So almost 2 weeks now, they've been waiting for airdrops of containers packed with equipment and ammunition and so on. But now they get to the point where the Home Army is radioing the West. They're saying, we do not ask for equipment. We demand its immediate dispatch. They're making it very clear that if they don't get this kit, they're not going to be able to continue the resistance fight. Stalin is continuing to refuse Britain and America the use of Russian-held airfields. So that means that the aircraft are coming huge distances. They can't stop to refuel, so there's only a limited amount of containers that they can take. They will be dropping them from the bomb bays over Warsaw. They are using British aircrew, but also courageous Polish aircrew and South Africans as well to fly over to Warsaw. The one thing they don't have a problem with is finding Warsaw, because the flames from the city are now soaring, hundreds of feet high in the air. Warsaw's visible for about 30 miles around at this point. But what it is difficult is to identify where they should drop the supplies, because clearly what they need to do is drop them to the resistance, not to the German-held zones of the city. So they drop target market flares on the ground. The resistance are lining up in units on the tops of buildings, but also in the big squares, laying out either torches or just tin cans filled with small fires to create flames, laying them out in various different designs to show wind direction, to show where they should make their drops. Then the aircraft send out marker flares, but it's almost impossible to see these targets. And as the planes come in, they're flying incredibly low because they don't want the equipment to smash. They can't drop them from a great height. So they have to come in fairly low. And we have lots of the reports from these crews, from the pilots and navigators, those that made it back, later testified that they could see German gunners lying on their bellies on the tops of the roofs in the sectors that they held, firing their weapons at the aircraft as they came in. So the nerves of steel these Allied pilots had. But deliveries do start, and there's a big airdrop on the 12th.
Just before we round off on the subject, I want to throw in something. So one of my insurgents, Wiesław Gniazdowski, he was a 14-year-old boy during the Warsaw Uprising. He was a messenger, and he remembers, and he told me all about this, when there was an airdrop in Powiśle, right by the river, and the parachute got caught up somewhere on the building, and because he was one of the youngest, he was the one sent up, had to scale up the side of the building. I'm not even sure how he did it, and managed to free the load. And it's what's really interesting is that you can see photographs of this airdrop, and what they got inside it was a pier and multiple weapons, and you can see in the photographs how happy they are with this drop. But Roger, what's happening on the ground? Is there anything else going on that we need to know about?
Yes, on the ground you still have German forces and German Allied forces that are committing the most heinous crimes against civilians and POWs. In many cases, you have drunk soldiers are sort of bayoneting those civilians that they find in their way. The rape of hundreds of women that are subsequently murdered. Constant atrocities of this sort being carried out. Other massacres are carried out on this day, one at the St. Jacob's Church and also at the Radiological Institute in Warsaw. So this is still one of the most sort of fundamental, sort of salient points, if you like, of the fighting in Warsaw, is this the willingness on the part of German forces to resort to the most heinous atrocities against civilians and POWs. And it's testament, as we've said before, to the sentiment that the Germans simply saw the Poles as being less than entirely human and thoroughly expendable. On the same day, on the 12th of August, the first transport of deported civilians from Warsaw arrived in Auschwitz, where they were taken to Auschwitz II, to the site at Birkenau. They were not tattooed, but they were given numbers and they were housed in the barrack blocks there. 12-year-old Jacek Kruczkiewicz was one of those, and he gave a very moving eyewitness testimony to their arrival.
The train started moving. The crowd in our carriage was maximum. It was difficult to sit on the floor, and it was impossible to even dream of lying down. It was very stuffy, and the small barred windows did not provide any air circulation. The journey passed slowly. Train dragged sluggishly, and around noon we stopped at the station in Mysłowice. Relief, because the sliding doors of the carriage were opened and an armed Banschutz sat on the step. When asked about the purpose of our trip, he made no secret of the fact that if the train moved from track to track after starting, we would not go towards Czechoslovakia and Germany, but towards Auschwitz. At around 2 p.m., the train stopped on a sliding where the Auschwitz board on the station building could be read from a distance. There was silence in the carriage. You didn't need to know German to realize where we were. We were stuck in the carriage until the evening, when it was already dark. The train started moving. The heavy carriage door slid open with a creak. We were on the ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau. We were greeted by an indescribable noise, barking dogs, screams of SS men, and fog with a stench difficult to describe. The yellow light of the arc lamps made an eerie impression. Very quickly, the disorderly crowd was separated. Women with younger children in one column, men and older boys in the other. We were rushed along a road between two rows of barbed wire. This was the beginning of our 5-month stay in the camp.
That was an incredibly harrowing account of a 12-year-old boy who was deported to Auschwitz and who lost many of his family members. But I do want to move on and just finish on what the Germans are doing on this day, Roger. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the fighting for Warsaw is still continuing. There's an interesting account from the combat diary of the 9th Army, which says that our forces, German forces, control 3/5 of the city, it says. But despite this, there is no reliable east-west communication. This was this problem that they had trying to secure those main thoroughfares across the city. So they're still frustrated by those Polish barricades on Jerusalem Avenue and elsewhere. And it concludes, it says, the Poles are fighting with extreme ferocity. So the fighting in Warsaw is still ongoing. The battle is not yet decided by any means.
Thank you so much for joining us on day 12 of the Warsaw Uprising. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for day 13. And don't forget to leave us a review on your preferred listening platform. We do want to reach out to as many people as possible. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.